China won't stop warning about Japan's military. Turn on Chinese state TV, scroll through state-run news apps, or watch political talk shows, and one country keeps appearing next to the words threat, remilitarization, and containment. Japan. Why? Why is Beijing suddenly so loud about a neighbor that for decades the world labeled a pacifist state? Why does Chinese propaganda sound like Japan's military is waking up as a dangerous force on China's doorstep? And deeper than that, what is China really afraid of? In this video, we're going to unpack that fear. Not with cheap stereotypes and not with war hype, but by following a trail that runs from the ruins of World War II through a pacifist constitution into a modern high-tech military and right into the heart of China's domestic politics. Because once you see how all of this connects, you'll understand why Japan appears so often on Chinese screens, and why those warnings say as much about Beijing's anxieties as they do about Tokyo's decisions. Let's start with a picture most people still carry in their minds: the myth of a completely pacifist Japan. After World War II, Japan adopted a constitution that included a famous clause, Article 9. On paper, Japan renounced war as a sovereign right. It promised not to maintain land, sea, and air forces with war potential. That line is quoted all the time. It sits at the center of Japan's post-war identity, a country that knows the horror of war and chose to step away from it. Instead of an army, Japan created something with a softer name, the Self-Defense Forces, usually called the JSDF. The word defense is doing a lot of work there. It sounds limited, cautious, even harmless. For decades, many outsiders, especially those far from Asia, imagined Japan as militarily weak. A rich economy, yes. High-tech, yes. But when it came to hard power, they pictured not much more than a modest force, tied up by constitutional rules and political debate. But that image is badly outdated. In reality, Japan quietly built one of the most advanced militaries in the world. Its navy fields sophisticated destroyers and submarines. Its air force flies modern fighters, supported by powerful radar and surveillance systems. And its missile defenses are designed to track and intercept threats in an increasingly tense region. Japan spends billions every year on defense, and that budget has been rising. Recent governments have openly signaled that Japan needs to take a stronger security role, especially as North Korea tests missiles and China expands its military footprint. So while many people still repeat the word pacifist, the gap between Japan's stereotype and Japan's capabilities is enormous. And that gap is exactly where Chinese propaganda loves to operate. On one side, it constantly reminds audiences of Japan's brutal wartime past. On the other side, it watches every Japanese defense decision like a hawk, framing it not as cautious modernization, but as a potential return to militarism. If you look at Chinese state media today, you'll see a pattern. Whenever Japan increases defense spending, whenever Japan joins an exercise with the United States, whenever a Japanese politician mentions China by name as a security concern, Chinese headlines, commentators, and military experts rush to respond. They talk about hostile forces. They warn of encirclement and containment. They describe Japan's moves as dangerous, provocative, or destabilizing. Japan is framed as a key piece in a larger anti-China puzzle, a frontline state helping the United States and its allies box China in. This is not random. Propaganda is never only about reporting facts. It's about shaping how people feel and who they blame. By constantly highlighting Japan, its ships, jets, alliances, and statements, Chinese media does several things at once. It gives the public a clear external villain. It justifies China's own military buildup as a necessary response. And it sends a warning to other neighbors. If you side with Japan and the US, you are part of the problem. But to really grasp why Japan plays this role, we have to go back before modern missiles and stealth fighters, to a time when China suffered under Japan in ways that shaped national memory for generations. In the early 20th century, Imperial Japan invaded and occupied large parts of China. Cities like Nanjing saw atrocities on a scale that still shocks people today. Millions of Chinese died, and the war left deep scars. After 1949, the new Chinese state made this trauma a central part of its story. School textbooks, movies, museums, and TV dramas often return to the theme of national humiliation and resistance against foreign invaders, especially Japan. In this narrative, Japan is not just a former occupier. It is the symbol of a world that once bullied and carved up China when it was weak. Those memories are not allowed to fade. They are taught and retaught. They're emotionally powerful and emotionally useful. So when modern Japan debates defense policy or buys new fighter jets, Chinese propaganda has an easy storyline ready. Look, Japan is becoming dangerous again. Never forget what they did. We must stay vigilant. This isn't just about the past. It's about using the past to emotionally charge the present. If you constantly remind your population that a neighbor once burned your cities and massacred your civilians, it becomes much easier to sell the idea that any military move by that neighbor is a potential first step back to those horrors. But history alone doesn't explain the intensity of the warnings. The truth is, Beijing's fear is not only about what Japan did. It's also about what Japan has quietly become. Japan's self-defense forces, despite their soft name, are not a small, poorly equipped militia. They are highly trained, highly modern, and tightly integrated with some of the most advanced technology on Earth. Japan's Navy operates sophisticated Aegis-equipped destroyers, capable of tracking and intercepting incoming threats. Its submarines are quiet, advanced, and respected by military analysts worldwide. Its air force includes modern fighter jets, early warning aircraft, and surveillance platforms that feed a detailed picture of the skies and seas around it. Japan's anti-submarine warfare, missile defenses, and logistics systems are all geared toward a serious, high-end conflict scenario, not just a token self-defense posture. On top of that, Japan has a strong industrial base and advanced technology sector. If its leaders decided to expand capabilities further, the country has the money, the engineers, and the experience to do it. But here is the part that really changes the equation for China. Japan is not standing alone. For decades, Japan has been tied to the United States in a deep security alliance. American troops, aircraft, and ships are stationed on Japanese soil. The two countries train together, plan together, and prepare for crises together. From Beijing's perspective, this means Japan isn't just a neighbor. It's a platform, a launch pad for American military power in Asia. So when Chinese media warns about Japanese ships, it is also warning about American ships that could operate alongside them. When it talks about Japanese radar systems, it is also thinking about the wider US-led network they plug into. When Japan joins other US allies in exercises and agreements, it feeds a narrative of a tightening circle around China. Propaganda often frames Japan as a pawn of the United States, used by Washington to apply pressure on China. It presents Japanese leaders as following orders from across the Pacific, sacrificing their own independence to help contain China's rise. This framing serves several purposes. It attacks both Japan and the US at the same time. It suggests that any confrontation with Japan is really a confrontation with American power. And it reassures Chinese audiences that Japan's firmness is not coming from Japanese strength alone, but from American backing. But again, these external narratives also have an internal function. Governments facing economic slowdowns, rising youth unemployment, or public dissatisfaction often look for convenient external threats. If people are worried about jobs, prices, and corruption, it can be risky for those in power. But if people are also constantly told that encirclement is growing, that enemies are plotting, and that history could repeat itself, their anger can be redirected outward. Japan is almost perfectly suited to play that role in Chinese propaganda. It is close. It has a painful historical record. It is allied with the US. It is openly modernizing its military. And it is easy to show its moves as part of a larger anti-China plan. So by exaggerating the danger of Japan's military, Chinese state media can do several things at once. It can justify big defense budgets and new weapons programs. It can frame critics of those budgets as naive or unpatriotic. It can call for unity against outside threats. And it can distract from internal issues by keeping the public's attention fixed on a dangerous world outside. But Chinese propagandists are not just working with stories and emotions. They're also looking at a map. Look at East Asia from above. China faces outward toward the Pacific, but it isn't opening into empty ocean. A chain of islands stretches from Japan down through Taiwan and the Philippines. This so-called first island chain is a natural barrier, a series of stepping stones that matter deeply to both trade and war. Japan sits in a critical part of this chain, right along sea lanes that China uses for shipping, energy, and trade. If relations soured and tensions escalated, a militarily strong, US-aligned Japan could make life very complicated for Chinese naval forces trying to move out into the wider Pacific. This is one reason why disputed islands and territorial claims in the East China Sea trigger loud responses from Beijing. They're not just rocks. They're potential footholds, observation posts, and pressure points. When Japanese Coast Guard ships or military aircraft patrol near these areas, Chinese media often reacts with outrage, framing it as aggression, provocation, or proof that Japan wants to challenge China's rightful space. From a strategic angle, Chinese planners know that in any serious conflict, control of the seas and skies around Japan would be crucial. So they pay very close attention to Japanese capabilities, and then translate that attention into emotional language for domestic audiences. Behind the dramatic headlines, the message is simple. Look at the map. Look at the islands. We are being encircled. We must be strong. There's one more layer to the fear that is rarely spoken clearly, but often felt. Japan does not have nuclear weapons, but it does have advanced nuclear technology and the industrial capacity to move quickly if it ever made that political decision. Military analysts around the world quietly acknowledge that if Japan decided to develop nuclear weapons, it likely could do so far faster than many other countries. Nobody in power in Tokyo is openly calling for this. Japan remains under the US nuclear umbrella, and public opinion on nuclear weapons is deeply shaped by the trauma of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But the mere possibility that a rich, high-tech democracy in East Asia could decide, under enough pressure, to become a nuclear power, changes how strategists think about the long term. For Beijing, it's another unsettling what if. What if Japan's fear of China grows? What if US guarantees weaken? What if a crisis pushes Japan to cross a line it has avoided for decades? Chinese propaganda doesn't spell this out clearly, but it often hints at a Japan that is breaking past limitations, normalizing its military, and becoming more assertive. That persistent hint adds another shadow behind the warnings. When you pull all of these threads together, history, modern military strength, alliances, geography, and potential future decisions, a deeper picture emerges. China isn't just warning about Japan's military because of what Japan has today. It's warning about what Japan represents and what Japan could become. Japan challenges China's control of the historical narrative. If the world sees Japan as a responsible, normal military power, then China's story of permanent Japanese danger loses its force. Japan, backed by the United States, challenges China's freedom of movement at sea and in the air. A strong US-Japan alliance reduces Beijing's ability to intimidate neighbors or act alone without consequences. Japan complicates China's domestic messaging. People are told that China is strong and rising, yet they are also warned of dangerous enemies nearby. If neighbors like Japan become more confident and well-armed, that story becomes harder to manage. And finally, Japan represents a future in which China might have to deal not just with one superpower on the other side of the Pacific, but with a network of advanced, coordinated, and increasingly assertive countries along its own borders. So, when Chinese propaganda keeps repeating warnings about Japan's military, it's doing more than describing a neighbor's ships and jets. It is, in a way, revealing China's own fears. Fear of being surrounded by capable rivals. Fear of losing control over a powerful historical story. Fear that internal unity might weaken without external threats. Fear that the rules of the region might be written by a group of countries that don't want to live in China's shadow. That's why the same images appear over and over. Japanese destroyers plowing through rough seas, fighter jets taking off from runways, maps of disputed islands, clips of US and Japanese leaders shaking hands. Together, they build a picture that tells Chinese audiences, we are threatened, we must be strong, we must stay united. For the rest of the world, including you watching this video, these stories matter for another reason. They don't just reflect reality, they shape it. If millions of people grow up being told that a neighbor is always on the edge of becoming an enemy again, if every small move in defense policy is framed as a step toward disaster, if history is presented as a straight line from past horrors to future danger, then it becomes easier for governments to increase military budgets, harder to compromise, and more dangerous when crises erupt. The louder propaganda shouts about a neighbor's army, the more we should ask a simple question. What is it trying to hide about its own fears? China won't stop warning about Japan's military, but hidden inside those warnings is a quiet admission: Japan matters deeply to China's future. Not just because of what happened in the 1930s and 1940s, but because of what might happen in the 2030s and 2040s. A confident, well-armed Japan, tightly connected to the United States and other regional partners, is one of the few neighbors that can genuinely complicate China's plans. And that is something Beijing will never admit plainly on a news broadcast. It is safer to talk about threats, containment, and remilitarization than to say, "We are worried, we are not as comfortable as we look." As viewers outside these propaganda systems, we have a choice. We can treat headlines like drama and pick sides blindly, or we can pause, look behind the language, and ask, what is each country afraid of? And what do those fears push them to do? If this video helped you see the China-Japan relationship in a deeper way, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Japan's military is underestimated or overrated? Do you see it as a stabilizing force or a potential spark in an already tense region? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more calm, story-driven explanations of the hidden tensions, alliances, and fears shaping Asia and the wider world, remember to subscribe. Your likes, comments, and shares tell the algorithm that videos like this are worth pushing to more people, and that helps this channel grow and keep making content that goes beyond surface-level headlines. Thank you for watching and for staying with me all the way to the end. Until next time, stay curious and always look for the fears behind the propaganda.